this evening or this afternoon or whatever time it is where you're listening to this presentation. We are going to be talking about peer review today. The cornerstone of academic publishing, as you probably already know, but we're going to be talking in quite a lot of detail in this presentation about how you can survive peer review as an author, and not just survive peer review, how you can manage the peer review process to your advantage as an author, how you can use the peer review process to increase your chances of getting your articles published in your target journals, which is something that not a lot of people know about. Everybody knows about peer review, everybody knows what it is, but not a lot of people know how to manage the peer review process to increase their chances of publishing success. So that's what we're going to talk about in our presentation today, how to survive peer review as an author. Very important tips and insights from our experience at TopEdit, running training programs, writing our own academic papers, and editing hundreds and hundreds of articles over the last number of years. My name is Gareth Dyke. I have deep experience writing and publishing my own academic papers. I've written and published more than 280 of them myself, including in journals like Nature and Science. I also work for TopEdit, running training programs and also editing and managing academic journals, a number of academic journals. You can see here my biography on this slide. I hope that in this presentation, I can share with you some insights and some tricks and tips that you can use in the peer review process as an author submitting your papers to international journals that are SCI listed, to increase your success and your chances of getting your articles published. Now, we're going to have a presentation, and if you have questions as we go through this presentation, please type them into the chat. Give them into the chat. We will have a chance to answer questions, comments, and feedback at the end of our presentation today. So don't be shy. Don't be scared. If you want to comment, please do so. Ask us questions. Perhaps you've got some current issues with an article that you're trying to get published and you'd like some help with managing the peer review process. Okay, let's get started with our content today. Why are we going to talk about peer review? What are we going to discuss in our presentation today? You might be asking yourself, what's the point? Why should I listen to this presentation this evening? We are going to discuss a number of issues in this presentation. What is peer review? We're going to recap that because it's important to understand peer review, in particular the different kinds of peer review that journals use so that we can manage the process more effectively as authors. We're going to talk about how you can select peer reviewers yourself, something that not a lot of people know about, that you can actually manage the process by actively suggesting peer reviewers when submitting your articles to academic journals. When the comments come back from the peer review process, and we've all experienced this as authors, we get comments back in peer review, how can we respond effectively to them? Indeed, what do the different decisions that journals send back to us, the authors, what do those decisions actually mean? How you can manage your responses to peer review to maximize your paper's chances of being successfully accepted. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can appeal peer review decisions, which is, again, something that not a lot of people know about. Most authors don't do this. Most authors don't know that this is something they can do. How you can manage rejection and actively appeal the decisions that journals may make about your papers. All of this, TopEdit training, top training, it's aimed at helping you, an academic author, be more successful writing and publishing your work. So let's get started. Let's talk about peer review, surviving it and managing it as an author. This slide, probably you're thinking it's quite basic. What is peer review? We're going to talk quickly about this though, because you need to clearly understand how peer review works as an author in order to manage the process. So peer review, of course, is the process that international, national, SCI listed journals, journals that are reputable, journals that have a good reputation that we want to use for our academic papers, they use this process to judge the quality of the academic papers submitted for publication. So peer-reviewed papers, of course, are thought to be reliable in the academic community because they've undergone this peer review process before publication. So when selecting journals for your academic articles, you should always initially be looking for whether or not the journal uses peer review. If it doesn't use peer review, don't send your articles there because the journal won't be listed in an international database. It won't be reputable. Peer review is the basis for academic publishing. It's the fundamental cornerstone of academic publishing. Your articles will be peer reviewed before they're published. The question is, how can we as authors manage that process effectively to enhance our chances of getting our articles published? So we need to talk about the peer review process, its value in the academic community. We are all aware of why journals use peer review, but let's talk quickly about the different kinds of peer review that journals use so that we can understand how to manage the submission and peer review process more effectively. Different journals, different publishing companies often use different kinds of peer review, and you may be given the choice by a journal that you're submitting to as an author as to which process, which kind of peer review to use for your next paper. So basically speaking, journals use either completely open peer review or some kind of blinded peer review, as it's called. Completely open is a situation where I might submit an article to a journal, the editor then passes my paper out for peer review, and both the reviewer and me, the author, are aware of each other's identity. I know who the reviewers are, the reviewers know who I am. As an author, it's completely open, has its benefits, and of course it has its drawbacks, obvious drawbacks to authors in particular. For this reason, lots of journals now use some kind of blinded peer review, either single blind or so-called double blind. In single blind review, the reviewers are unaware of the author's identity or vice versa. The authors don't know who the reviewers are. And in double blind peer review, both parties, the reviewers, the peer reviewers and the authors, are kept unaware of each other's identity by the journal, by the editor. You can imagine that most authors, actually, most academic authors feel that double-blind peer review is the fairest way to have their papers assessed. There's obvious bias in the peer review process. We know that people from certain countries, different areas, when reviewed by reviewers from other countries, other areas might, there might be inherent bias in the peer review process. So it's important to be aware of which kind of peer review your journal, your target journal is using. And if you have the choice, make an informed decision, talking to your colleagues, talking to other people in your research group about which kind of peer review you think is best. If you think, as I do, that double-blind peer review is the best way to get your articles fairly evaluated by academic journals, then choose journals that use that policy, or choose journals that give you the option of using that policy as an author. But make sure, as an author, that when you submit an article into the double-blind peer review process, you take out all identifying marks from your manuscript. Lots of people write things like, I recently showed, and then cite themselves in the article. That, of course, gives the game away to the reviewer. The reviewer knows who the authors are. If you write things like, our research group recently showed, and then cite yourself, or if you leave the track changes or the PDF track change option turned on with your name on it in one of your software packages, be careful when going into double-blind peer review that actually it's not obvious to the reviewers who you are. These different forms of peer review used by different journals are important to know about as authors, because the way that you write, the way that you manage your article under these different systems will be different and will require different strategies when submitting and responding to comments. Completely open, single blind, and double blind peer review. Very important to be aware which kind your journal is going to be using. Then we need to talk about who your reviewers are going to be. And we're going to talk in more detail about this in a minute, but peer reviewers, either selected by the editor or by the journal, or suggested to the editor, to the journal by you, which is what you should be doing, as we'll talk in a minute. Peer reviewers are currently working in the same field, we hope, or have recently published on similar topics to the topic that you are submitting your article on. They are asked by journals to critically comment from an academic perspective, from a scientific perspective. They're asked by journals, where are the issues? Where are the problems with this article? So you can immediately see that the process is negative. Journals ask peer reviewers, tell us where the issues are with this submission. Tell us where the problems are. Tell us where the room for improvement is in this article, right? The journals ask reviewers negative questions. The reviewers, because they're human beings, we all experience this ourselves when we're asked to comment on the work of others, we always think, where are the problems? We don't think, how can I help this person to improve? We think, where are the issues? You have to keep this in mind as an author. Negative peer review, it's a negative process. Think about this when writing. Think about this when putting your articles together. Try to anticipate the problems that peer reviewers may have with your papers. The second really important thing to say about peer review, is that journals always say, do not talk about the language to peer reviewers. They always say, if you feel there are language issues with this article, send it back to us. We will get it edited. We will ask the authors to get their article edited by a native speaker. But peer reviewers almost always comment on the language, the English language in academic papers. So they're negative, they're looking for problems, and they're looking at the language. So often we find that good quality academic work, great quality science, difficult to understand because the language is hard to understand. For this reason, it's important to get your work polished, edited, up to standard in English so that the reviewers will look at the academic content and not necessarily focus on the English. These are important points to make in the context of who are peer reviewers. They make comments then on academic articles, on your next academic paper, and they send those comments back to the editor. A view on your paper is communicated directly to the editor, not to you, the authors. It's also then very, very important to always keep in mind that reviewers often make comments to the editor about your paper that you will never know about. Often, very often, journals ask for quite detailed sets of comments from peer reviewers that are not passed on to the authors. You just get to see a small, broken down subset of the total set of comments that peer reviewers make to journals, to editors. So the decisions that editors make based on peer review comments very often incorporate additional extra comments from reviewers that you as an author will never get to see. Keep this in mind as well when responding to peer review, which is something we're going to talk about in a minute in this presentation. Peer reviewers have a negative mindset. This is so important to keep in mind as an author. You know it, you do it yourself. We all do this when somebody asks us to comment on their work. People are looking for problems. As I've already talked about, peer reviewers are thinking, where are the issues with this article? And if you cast your mind back to our previous presentation in this series, or you've heard some of our other presentations about paper writing in the past, you'll know that the main section of academic papers where there are issues from peer review, it's very often the methods section. This part of the paper is the bit that you have to really focus on as a writer to make sure there are no significant problems. Issues and the methods section. So getting your paper up to standard to get it through peer review depends on having in mind this fact about the peer review process, that reviewers are often negative in the way that they look at papers, and the fact that the English level has to also be enhanced to make the paper acceptable for peer review. Having said all of this, the basics of understanding peer review, right? The second aspect of this is the submission process. How can you select peer reviewers? People often ask us this question in workshops. I'm about to make a submission to an international journal. How can I select peer reviewers who would be good, who would give me favorable comments on my paper? And the answer to this is to use what's called your mentorship network. Reach out to international colleagues. We all have mentorship networks. Everybody develops a network of international colleagues when they start working in academia. When you start working on your master's degree, your PhD, your postdoc, you develop a network of international colleagues by talking to people, by working with people. And you should develop this in the context of each research project by writing to international colleagues and talking to them about your research, which is something that we're going to also expand on in a minute in this presentation. There is nothing wrong. In fact, it's a good idea, a very good idea, to finish a research project and then send the abstract, the title, the results out to international colleagues and ask them for feedback. If you get good feedback, and I'm sure you will get good feedback because you're all doing fantastic research, you get that good positive feedback from your colleague in Germany or your colleague in the United States or your colleague in the UK or wherever, Australia, I'm just making up countries, but the comments come back that are positive. You then say, dear Professor so-and-so, when I send this paper to this journal, would you be interested in being a peer reviewer? If they say yes, That's great. You put them into the submission system, you put their names in your covering letter, which we'll talk about again in a minute. Reach out to international colleagues. Don't be shy. Develop that mentorship network. It's critical for young researchers to do this. You never know who you're going to meet at conferences, online, where you're going to get that next postdoc, that next job, that next collaboration opportunity from. So senior colleagues, authors of other papers in your field, but peer reviewers cannot be other colleagues, students, or direct collaborators. Journals will catch this, and that's actually unethical to suggest somebody from the next office in your university or one of your PhD students or one of your recent direct collaborators as a peer reviewer. Reach out to people, talk to them about your research. Why not send out abstracts and summaries of your work? Initiate discussions, build that international mentorship network. This is why, by the way, preprint servers and using preprint servers for your research, which is something that we're going to talk about in future presentations like this, can be such a good idea. Get your work onto relevant preprint servers. People will look at it, they'll comment on it, they'll provide you with feedback. You can then use them as peer reviewers, and journal editors will come to you when they see your research, they think it's interesting, they'll come to you. You won't have to put so much effort into finding and selecting journals. So reach out to colleagues using networking tools. And I know that the networking tools that people in my part of the world might use will be very different to the kind of networking tools that you are using in your daily academic life, but it is nevertheless worthwhile to get your work onto some international networking systems, international networking databases, even if you don't use them often, even if you don't use these tools every day. Why not have a ResearchGate, an academia.edu, even a LinkedIn or a Google Scholar profile if possible, because this means that international colleagues will be more easily able to find you. Sign up for an Orcid ID, orcid.org, international researcher identification numbers. People will know more about your work. The point of successfully managing peer review is developed from having and developing an international mentorship network. So reach out to colleagues. Don't be shy about talking to people about your work. Are you aware of the kinds of ways that colleagues around the world in different countries are networking as academics, are people using in different parts of the world? And there's the orcid.org researcher identification tool that I've already recommended to you. This is a charity. It's not making a profit. This is a great way, by the way, to keep your CV, your resume updated without doing anything. Sign up for an Orcid ID. It will automatically update all of your publications and all of your peer review activity online. Other colleagues can find you. You get recognition from international journals for the work that you do for those journals. And indeed, many international journals require that you have an Orcid ID before you can make a submission. Many of the big international publishing companies will actually be asking for an Orcid ID in order to make that submission. So things to think about: get your network developed, stay social, and make sure other colleagues around the world know about the great research that you're doing, because this is the key to successfully managing the peer review process. We know as journal managers, and this is a screenshot from the journal that I manage, one of the journals that I manage, often in the online submission systems of academic journals, you only get the chance now to oppose reviewers. You only get asked in the journal submission system to deselect reviewers. You don't have the opportunity often in the submission process to tell the journal who you think the good reviewers would be. We found we found that many authors were abusing the system. We had authors making up email addresses, putting in their friends' contact information, even one author putting in his grandmother's email address so that they could get the paper back, they could control the process. So most journals, many journals ask now just for deselection suggestions in the review process. So this is another reason why it's so important to use that cover letter when you write to journals, when you make your initial submission, something that we'll talk about again in a minute. Here's the academic cycle, the cycle of research. Ideas, funding, unfortunately, most of us have to come up with the money before we can get any of the research done. Data collection, journal selection, paper writing, which is something that we, of course, at TopEdit can help you with a great deal. Submission, we're talking about that in this presentation today. And then the peer review and publication process. It really is the final stage of that academic journey, that academic cycle. But in many ways, the one that academic researchers know the least about. Most of us are good at coming up with ideas. Most of us are quite good at coming up with money, hopefully. Most of us are quite good at data collection, journal selection, and paper writing to a greater or lesser extent. I know it's difficult in a second or third language. Submission, though, and the peer review process are areas that authors actually often know very little about, which is the point of this presentation. We aim to help you understand better and manage better these different aspects of the academic cycle. So let's imagine we've written an article, we've submitted it to Nature, we're waiting for the reviews to come back. We've suggested a number of reviewers from our international network who may or may not have been selected by the editor as reviewers. One of 4 possible decisions are usually made by peer reviewers: reject, accept, minor and major revisions. You're thinking again, this is basic stuff. Why is he talking about this? Well, it's important, again, to think about these different decisions because they mean quite different things. Reject and accept by reviewers after submission, it's very rare in academic publishing. This is because the editor will have already made a decision about your paper. They'll be thinking, this is potentially good enough for submission and publication in our journal. I'm going to send it out for peer review. Rejection and acceptance make editors suspicious from initial peer review. Usually, peer reviewers come back and ask authors either, as you probably know, to make minor or major changes. These are the most common decisions after first review, and they actually mean quite different things. Reject is rare. Editors normally pre-screen papers. Accept is rare. This makes editors suspicious. They think, why has this reviewer accepted the paper? Maybe they're friends with the author. Maybe there's something going on there. Minor revisions, common decision from reviewers if the paper is considered almost ready for publication. This means to you as an author, and read the emails that you get from journals very carefully. If the journal is asking you for minor revisions or words to that effect, it means that the editor considers the article almost ready for publication, and they probably won't be sending the article back again for second review. Minor comments, the reviewers won't see the article again. They won't see your comments on the reviews, your responses. Major revisions, on the other hand, serious issues with the article that will require significant changes, perhaps a reanalysis. If you get this decision back from a journal, and again, read the email very carefully, we can help you to interpret the emails that you get back from journals, of course. If you get an email that says major revisions required, substantial revisions required, then the reviewers who looked at the paper the first time are almost certain to at least be offered the chance to look at it again. This influences how you manage the process, how you write your response document back to the journal, because of course the reviewers are going to get to see it. How you do that then is different in these different cases. Keep these decisions in mind from journals, which brings me on to the next question then, how to effectively respond to the review comments that you get back from journals. How to do this? Here are some tricks, here are some insights, here are some tips based on our deep experience doing this ourselves. You get comments back from a journal, reviewer 1, reviewer 2, reviewer 3, whatever. How to respond to those comments is critical. The most important thing to do is to show your editor that you take the process seriously. We get lots of emails, lots of documents back from authors that just say, thank you for the review comments. We have made all the changes requested. Yours sincerely, Gareth. That's a waste of time. Show the editor you take the process seriously. Make a response document that interleaves review comments with your responses, and do all of the comments, even the small ones, even the spelling mistakes, even the small typographic errors. Show your editor that you took the process seriously. They will appreciate it. They will feel better about your work. They will be more likely to accept it at the end of the day. Keep your responses polite is the other comment I would make. Lots and lots of authors are rude to editors when responding to review comments because they disagree with the comments. They write things that show the editor that they're angry about the comment. Be comprehensive, be polite, manage the process. You can do this. You can show your editor that you're taking the process seriously. So make a document, put the time into this that interleaves the review comments. Comment from reviewer 1, my response. Comment from reviewer 1, my response. Comment from reviewer 2, my response. Do all the comments. Keep your responses sensible and polite. Lots of people use a different color, a different font when responding to these review comments in order to show clearly to the editor what they've done in the file. Fully incorporate your reviewers' suggestions into a revised manuscript. Address all of your reviewers' concerns in your rebuttal letter, and you are talking to the editor, not the reviewers, talking to the editor, because they are the ones that will make the decision. So in areas of disagreement between you and the reviewers, which is something we'll talk about in a minute, talk and address your comments to your editor. Here's an example that I made up for this presentation, but you can see how it works. At the top of the response document, you put an editorial summary, an executive summary, if you like, that quickly and simply tells the editor what you've done. We would like to thank the 2 reviewers who worked on our paper for their considerable efforts and the time they devoted to our work. We've made almost all the changes requested and enclose a revised manuscript. Changes to our paper can be seen in red in the main document and figure captions. Our responses are summarized here, interleaved, as you can see, in red. Tells the editor what you've done, is polite, and says things like, thank you, considerable efforts. Thank you for the excellent comments. Thank you for the insightful and accurate comment. Thank you for the editorial comment. If you tell your reviewers, thank you for the comment, thank you for the insightful comment, they will actually think when they read the response document, I made a good comment. I made an insightful comment. They will feel good about your paper. They will feel that they've helped you. Remember, they're starting the process from a negative perspective. Build that back to them. Give them something positive back. They will feel good about the changes that you've made if they feel that they have made a positive contribution. We would like to thank Reviewer 1 for this insightful and accurate comment. Thank you for this editorial comment. Reviewers will feel good. You can see how it can work. Put the time into your responses to reviews. What happens though in cases where you get negative reviews? Struggling to manage those comments from Reviewer 2? Try not to worry about negative comments that you may get back on your work. We can talk about this later as well in the question and answer session, because I'm sure that you have lots of examples. I have lots of examples from my own work where this has happened. Remember that it's the editor making the decision, right? So here's some tricks for responding to negative reviews. Be positive. Tell the editor first about the comments received that you agree with, and then talk about the changes you made. Fold, interleave, intersperse your responses to negative comments into your responses about positive comments. Salespeople will tell you about this technique. Say something positive, then say something negative, and then say something positive again. This is called the sandwich technique. You get those negative comments, those negative things, those responses to negative comments into the middle of the document, interleaved and surrounded by agreement, interleaved and surrounded by positive responses. And be positive and polite, as we've already discussed. Editors, they want to see that you're taking the process seriously. If you disagree with comments that you get in review, which happens, of course, all the time, explain clearly to the editor why you disagree and use citations and evidence if possible, right? Peer reviewers often make comments about work. If you can counter those negative comments with citations, with evidence, you will have a much higher chance of getting your work published. The comments come back then, the comments come back from the journal, and it is also often the case that journals will give the game away. We get comments back all the time on our papers. Often comments come back that request major revisions or indeed a resubmission. But at the same time, in the email that comes from the journal, there are production or copyright transfer information also included in the email. So check your emails from journals carefully. I got one of these last week from the Royal Society. It was a rejection with an invitation to resubmit, which is in their case the same thing as major revisions, but also in the email they asked us to sign the image and production copyright forms. This means that the journal, the editor, is expecting the paper to be accepted. This will be the case often, even if the editor is asking for additional revisions to be made. This is because, of course, that journals want to speed up their workflows. My point in telling you this, giving you this information, is that there are lots of things that you can know. We can teach you about journal management systems and the way that editors and academic journals work that will make you more successful at publishing. Lots of authors get emails back from journals, major revisions required. They get disheartened. They get sad. They think, how am I ever going to get this paper accepted? But actually, the email from the journal tells you, if you read it in the right way, if you know what you're looking for, the email from the journal tells you that they expect the paper to get accepted. Finally, then, let's talk about managing rejection and the appeal process in academic publishing. Very often, happens all the time, happens to me all the time. Almost every paper I've ever written got rejected from the first journal that I submitted it to. That's because you should be aiming high with your submissions. going to journals with higher impact factors, and then working down the tree, working down after rejection to other journals with slightly lower impact factors. When you get rejected, if you feel you've been badly treated or you disagree with the comments that come back after peer review, you can always appeal. You can always appeal. If you feel your research was well done, you feel your research deserves to reach the journal's audience, if your research demonstrates importance, it's always, always, always worth writing that email, takes 5 minutes, to the editor saying, thank you for the comments. Even though my paper has been rejected, if I am able to make all the changes requested, will you consider a resubmission? Or, I disagree with some of these comments, will you consider a resubmission? Appealing is something that successful academics do all the time, and editors often change their minds. Rejection from Nature, from Science, from an international journal, doesn't matter which, doesn't have to be the end of the road with that journal. Too many authors, and don't make this mistake in your career, too many authors walk away. They say, oh, I've been rejected, I'm just going to reformat and submit to another journal. Ask the editor before you do that, if I can make all the changes requested, will you consider a resubmission? This will mean that you won't have to miss out in your career on potential publications that could significantly influence the course of your academic development. Be confident and believe in your work. It's one of the keys to success as an international researcher. We find that in different parts of the world, researchers react quite differently to negative comments about their work. In my country, in the UK, in Germany, in the US, for example, especially students, young researchers, they get negative comments on their papers. They often tend to think it's the reviewer's problem. They didn't understand my brilliant research. They respond positively to negative comments. In other parts of the world, people often think, how am I ever going to get my work up to the standard for publication in this journal? We don't work just in our own countries anymore. We network, we collaborate internationally. Confidence and belief in your work is a skill that you can learn. We can train you, we can help you to be more confident when you network, when you meet people, when you interact with colleagues, when you give presentations, and when you write your articles and respond to peer review. It really is one of the keys to success as an international researcher. Lots of my papers, including some high-profile examples in Nature Communications, in Nature, for example, were initially rejected, often with very negative comments. But because we disagreed, and because we were confident that the work was good, we were able to write successful appeal letters to editors and get the work reviewed again, get the work given a second chance, and it eventually got published. Don't walk away, be confident, and have that level of self-belief. We can train you to do this with your own publication. So, negative review comments, journal gave you the finger, don't agree. Our advice is to try not to just take it, try not to move on too fast, try not to get down about negative comments, appeal, talk to editors. Editors are gatekeepers, able to change their minds. Often journal editors do that. They think again about their decisions following direct communication from authors. It's one of the other key ways, one of the other important ways in which you can manage the peer review process. About 40% of articles published in leading international journals were initially rejected following peer review. So give this some thought the next time you have to deal with the peer review process, the next time that you get comments back from one of your papers. We will talk in one of our later presentations in the next one in this series about how you can do peer review successfully as an academic researcher. You're often going to get asked by journals to perform peer review, to actually do it for a journal. Today, we've talked about how you can manage the peer review process. Next time, we're going to talk about how you can do a successful, a good peer review. Some journals will help you, many won't. Journals are all different. Some will lead you and others won't. We will teach you how to comment on the science, the academic content, not necessarily the writing. Your job is not to act as an editor. We will help you with this in our next presentation because constructively commenting on the work of other people is a key transferable skill. Very important for your career development, very important for your personal and career development in any walk of life. It doesn't matter if you leave academia, in business, in any way of working, being constructive about the work of others is a critical transferable skill. We'll talk about that in our next presentation. I'll just now review and recap what we've discussed today. We've talked about 5 topics. What is peer review? How you can select peer reviewers for your work? What do the peer review decisions that you get back from journals actually mean? How you can respond more effectively to the peer review comments that you get? And finally, how you, as an author, can manage rejection and the appeal process. What is peer review? How to select those reviewers? What do the decisions mean? Responding effectively and managing rejection and appeals. My name is Gareth Dyke. This has been another TopEdit, Top Training presentation for you, and thank you so much for listening. I'm going to hand back to my colleague, and we are available now for any questions, comments, feedback, and we certainly hope to see you again in our next TopEdit presentation. Thank you so much for listening.